Yeah, so you know, you mentioned perspective being everything. And
Mm.
bro, perspective is definitely changes everything, right? Um, one sec. Yeah, perspective definitely changes everything, you know. And the biggest thing that I wanted you to understand is when it comes to your relationship with your father, a man's development into himself and the higher levels that he's able to get, that relationship comes from truly understanding the dynamics of yourself and your father, right? I wanted you to really notice you attributed no negative bias to your mother's decisions, only attributed negative bias to your father's decisions, even though you have negative, uh, you know, experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have you experienced negative from your mother, and your father wasn't around to get those negative experiences. So this problem is a common problem in society where young men have all this vitriol for their fathers, even if they weren't around. But they usually never have vitriol for their mothers, even though they were around enough to experience some of the dysfunction their mothers experienced, right? And experience some of the dysfunction their mothers were responsible for, right? So a lot of this is really hard to grasp in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? But you grasp it very easily. And that was about your perspective shifting, right? Your perspective had to shift enough to actually be willing to look at it like, okay,
Fictional point of view.
not just an objective point of view, right? But that objective point of view comes from the fact that you can be like, man, my mama dated a man. I've dated a girl, right? I've dated a young woman before, right? I was a boy and I've dated a girl. I was a teenager. I've also been a young man and dated a young woman, and I've been an older man and dated an older woman, right? And as you get older, you're gonna date more women who are, you know, older. Even if you're with the same woman, you're gonna be with an older version of the same woman. And every man has had issues with that woman. But very few men are able to remember that their mother is another man's woman, right? Their mother is a man's woman. So that's something that is so hard to remember when it's time for you to think about your appraisal of your father. They could have had issues that you've probably been through with a girl, and your dad is wondering whether you understand, and whole time you understand already.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you.
So a lot of this perspective shift is a matter of not looking at it from the perspective of a son, but by looking at it from the perspective of first a lover, right? What do I experience from women as a lover? And could my mother be possible? Could it be possible that my mother has done some negative things to my father? And then think about yourself and think about what's some of the fucked up shit I've done to women? And is my father capable of doing some fucked up shit to women?
Uh,
You get what I mean?
I
So,
what? Because he is in me. Lol. All right then. I hear you.
you feel me?
I hear you.
You
I hear
feel me?
you. I hear you.
So Shout out to my London niggas. You get me, right?
Mm, Lord.
So this perspective shift is extremely essential in healing your wounds with your parents, man. Your parents' wounds and your own wounds are things you need to distinguish at an early age, because there's wounds and there's scars. And I shout out to my uncle, man. My uncle is responsible for a lot of the reason why I was able to develop into this man today. And I only call one uncle. So, he because what you say?
Why?
Because
Why
everybody,
him?
why specifically him?
Yeah, why is he different to everyone else?
Because first of all, everybody else is Baba so and so or Uncle so and so, but he's the only one I address as just Uncle, right? And he knows it's him, right? But one thing he told me was there are wounds and there are scars. He is a licensed practicing counselor, and I owe that man money for therapy. How much therapy he done gave me, right? Nah, man, you don't owe me nothing, fam.
Mhm.
Nah, for real, you don't. Only thing you owe me is to just be the best self that you can be.
I appreciate it. It's gems though, absolute gems, absolute gems. What?
Listen, man, that's all I care about on that end. But what he told me, there's wounds and there's scars. Scars are wounds that have already healed, right? A wound is something that's open and festering and hurts still. Um, when you don't properly care for a wound, it gets infected. When it gets infected, it can't heal properly, and so it stays festered. And pretty soon, you might lose a limb, you might lose a digit. So
You?
precisely, if you don't cut it off in time, if you don't fix it, right? And so a lot of this problem that occurs is really just us not knowing the difference between scars and wounds. And I think your father and a lot of young men, their father is a wound that was infected by confusion, right? Run it back. For a lot of young people, their father is a wound that was infected by confusion. And that confusion could be brought on by silence, it can be brought on by malice, it can be brought on by good intentions that end up going bad, right? All I know
I
is, right? All I know is when it comes to your parents, the story and the story that happened always usually meet in the middle and reach a place of understanding.
mm,
Like, I have a lot of issues with my own mom, but I learned a little bit about her childhood and it was rough, right? Does that mean I feel justified in my, anger about my own childhood? Absolutely. I ain't let that shit go yet. It's a scar, but it's one of my biggest scars. And it's on my face, so I don't want it. Bars. You know what I mean? It's on my face, so I don't want it. Right. But remember, perspective is about seeing and truly feeling and, you know, recognizing and thinking and praying about how you see things. And I tell you what, if it wasn't for my childhood, I wouldn't see things how I do now. And I'd like to say that I see things fairly clearly.
Word.
You get me? And that came from the perspective of having fucked up examples in relationships or fucked up examples in, just around me in my personal life. Your
Mm,
perspective is usually molded by your baseline. And my baseline was way different than most people, at least in America.
that's true. Uh, Same as me and the people around me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people's baseline is different. Like, for example, right? eh, I didn't relate to a lot of people and their great relationship with their moms. I didn't relate.
I can relate to the fact that a lot of my friends have both their parents, but with me, it's just me and my mom. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Um, what I'm saying is on a deeper point, blaming your father for why you don't have both parents may be an overestimation of his responsibility in that. You may be overestimating how responsible he is for that situation occurring to you. He could be a lot less responsible. And when you dig deeper, usually moms are a lot more responsible. Because remember, you've dealt with women in your life who have lied on you. Apply that to your mama. Everybody's mama is capable of it, just like everybody's daddy is capable of it.
Like,
So you could be in a place where your perspective is just on one side, attributing all this pain to, looking at it like, oh, people have both their parents. I just have my mom, right? That's a that's a tough thing to accept. But I looked at it the opposite way because I had it was the opposite way. My dad was available for pretty much anything in my childhood, especially my early childhood. My mom wasn't available for shit. So I never related to kids because kids would be mostly, we're in America. It's single mom mania. My dad was the active parent mostly in my childhood. And then my mom was just the present parent because she was physically around, but she wasn't any more active than she was when I was a kid. Right. And so what I'm saying is, and there were times where I was upset at my father for things that I was completely misguided about. Because remember, it was confusion that was muddying the waters. And when we're confused, our first instinct is to blame dad, because we look at dad as the source of strength from the family, and our first instinct is to protect mom. But when you get older and as you grow into manhood and you start to relate to the family court system, relationships, um it- people's personal and political and socioeconomic views and how they view you in that equation, you start to see, oh, dad was trapped in a lot of different ways, right? Dad was trapped in a lot of different ways. And that's a very hard perspective shift for a lot of young black men to recognize. Bro, you are going to go through similar things your father went through.
yeah.
And that is a very tough thing to reconcile if, you know, you're not conscious of the fact that there's two sides to every person's story. What the person that is involved says, what they say, but there's three. The truth is a totally other side. The truth, precisely, right? The truth is a totally other side. So it's important to change your perspective on your father. Changing your perspective on your father is one of the most important things a young man can do, because even if he was absent, even if he was absent, you must learn why, right? You must learn why. And if you don't like the answers, keep digging. You might understand, right? And that's only if you want to. I'm not saying you have to. And I'm not saying that every father on earth deserves that. I'm not even saying your father may deserve that. I'm saying you don't know if he does because you didn't even ask, right? Just the same way, just the same way you didn't ask your mother's part in it, and you've completely
Yeah,
accepted
I
that,
did ask that perspective. Yeah.
right? So changing your perspective about your father is about thinking more fairly about yourself. Thinking more fairly about yourself, because remember, your father is just an older you, right? And that is a really tough situation to be in, bro. But I really recommend you find a way to get his contact and just be like, really write out a series of questions and think about questions you want to ask your father, right? Not pertaining to his relationship with your mother, but pertaining to understanding some of his struggles, man. Ask him how he grew up. Don't come with bitterness. Get to know him like a random person. Cause look, you done lived with uh your family for years, and a lot of times you still don't get along. You ain't lived with your father, but you already have a preconceived notion, and you don't know if you could get along swimmingly. So it's a tough thing to change your perspective about your father when you've been locked in a paradigm that's influenced by history, that's influenced by your mother's voice, that's influenced by your family's voice. It's a hard thing to to grasp a perspective change about your father, right? But you said it yourself, you didn't know about the court case. You didn't know about um what was actually said, what actually happened. But you do know about certain things that we're going to keep off air. But you know that these them certain things made you laugh when you really thought about it. You know what I'm saying? It made you laugh when you really thought about it, bro. And it was like, wow, that's if I was in that position, I wouldn't be too happy. And that was the first time you felt like you was really starting to relate to your father and give him a benefit of the doubt, because you stopped thinking about it like a son who is mad he didn't have a father. You started thinking about it like a man who deserves to question things. And that was what the position of your father was in that time. Was a man who deserves to question things, right? And so this is some of the collateral damage of a lot of people's perspectives. And so to change, to understand your father's perspective, to understand your mother's perspective, you have to change your own perspective even now to a perspective that is wanting to understand perspective. So you have to change your perspective before you can even dive into other ones. It's kind of like cleansing yourself before entering a lab environment. You got to clean off your biases, your notions, so that you can dive into a state of empathy, right? To elucidate some of those mysteries behind your past. Drink from the cup of memory, as they say, right? You know,
Right.
so what do you think about that, man?
I actually agree. And in a way, you have changed my perspective on it, because before I did attribute malice to his actions and him not being here. but I do need to understand who he was and things that happened and his perspective as well. Just understand, changing my perspective on, you know, I don't even know how to describe it, but you've changed the way I see it. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'll now give it a chance and I'll go in without emotion to ask questions to actually get to know him.
You don't have to go in without emotion. Excuse me. You don't have to go in without emotion. You just have to go in with the right emotion. Because people are mutable like that. People can be fluid like that, right? Not on a not I'm not talking about a gender thing. I'm talking about in a two emotions occupying the same space kind of thing. You can still be sad that your father wasn't around while still being open and empathetic to understanding a story you never got before, that may put pieces together, that may validate your own experience, right? There were things I judged my father for that my mother had done to me as a boy. And I was like, bro, I judged him for certain shit, and he was experiencing it as a man and I was experiencing it as a boy, and he would tell me about it and how he handled it. And as a man, obviously I was like, man, that's exactly how I'd handle it. But I wasn't thinking about it like a man. I was thinking about it like a boy. Right? And so it it was something that took me over 10 years. It was something particular where I was like, Dad, you don't protect mom here, 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 and here. And he just was just smiling, looking at me. Never spoke bad about my mother in that case, even though that was my mother's voice speaking through me when I was a boy. And only when I got older did I really understand, wow, I was so wrong there. Right? I was so wrong. And I saw how much he experienced as a man. And I realized I needed to call him and apologize. Apologize for thinking he didn't protect my mother in a certain way, but he was in another way. And usually it's by preventing certain things, right? And that was something I didn't give him credit for, and I should have, right? So I called him to apologize. And our relationship he's always been there since boyhood. My father's been there since boyhood. During some of my teenage years, he was gone. Actually, all of my teenage years, he was gone because he had to go to Africa on that, immigration issue. But for the most part, bro, he was the active parent, man. Damn sure in my adulthood too. You know what I'm saying? Damn sure in my adulthood. So, and we've had our issues, but men mending things with men tends to be way more final and honest. See, a lot of women, they tend to be they get lean towards fake peace, where they won't necessarily talk about it, they'll just move on, but they won't really resolve the issue. They just want to feel heard. But we must resolve the issue. And after that, there is no issue. We've moved on. We'll laugh about it, right? And that's how me and my father moved, right?
I hear you. I
And
hear that.
this
I
it's
hear
a
that.
very special thing, man. And I think you can explore that and you'll learn so much about yourself, right? So much about yourself. But either way, I'm proud of you. You know what I'm saying? For especially for entertaining the fact that you could be incorrect about your
Yeah,
father,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
You could be wrong about your father. So talk to him, you know? And I think that's actually what I'm gonna title this video. You could be wrong about your father. So talk to him,
Mm.
you know? Um and I'm gonna go ahead on and go on a limb and say you're most likely wrong about your father, because it's very seldom, excuse me, it's very seldom that um You know, women admit when they fucked up in a relationship. You feel me? But on another note, man, you was telling me about one of your bros dirty macking you, man. That hurt my heart, man. Damn. That hurt
That
my
was so
heart.
bad.
How often do the people around you dirty mac for some of the women around you?
It doesn't happen often, and when it does happen, like I want to cut you off. But because you're so close, it's hard. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I see
So
what you're saying.
I'm stuck on what should I do.
Honestly, that's not that major. Um, that's really not that major. Like
But I'm talking about on a consistent basis.
I know, but even on a consistent basis, you have to remember. Th- mm, how do I put it? You know what? We're gonna save that one for the next one. We're gonna save that one for the next one. 1 second.
Mm.
Yeah, we're gonna save that one for the next one.